you need. So just change the encryption, the signature, the signing function call in SSL client authentication, and change that to a ring signature, and you're done. And you automatically have anonymous authentication. Secure authentication is, again, from the properties, the unforgeability properties of the ring signature, and anonymity comes from the anonymity of ring signatures that we talked about. So this solution is very, very nice. It's a new application of ring signatures, and it's nice because it just gives you a quick, direct plug-in to SSL with client authentication, and then everything is fine. To compare the protocols, well, actually, the first protocol that I showed you has higher bandwidth than the ring signature, because the ring signature itself is just one block length. It's no more. Its advantages are it's really simple, so I can actually show you and convince you that it's possible to get anonymous authentication. But ring signatures, I just sort of hand-waved and told you they exist. I didn't tell you how to do it, and it's much, much difficult to show you that. And also the advantage, you can use any encryption scheme, and it doesn't have high requirements, whereas ring signatures has other stronger requirements, but I'm going to ignore that for now. I want to talk a bit about revocable anonymity. Because in the protocols that I showed you now, there's no way to revoke anonymity. All the users behave in exactly the same way. And we want to be able to ban access to users who misbehave, hostile users, and in many cases we do need help to do that. Again, I'm assuming a court authority, and the court authority is able to revoke anonymity, but only that authority. There exist solutions to this problem. Again, the solutions that were until now used completely different cryptographic primitives, ones that are not deployed in practice and therefore are an obstacle. I'm working on this problem. I don't yet have a full solution. What I do have is a solution that does require a special purpose smart card. So for example, you need to use a Java card and put some a special purpose Java applet. Therefore, it's not as easily deployed, but it does still use standard RSA and standard PKI. So it's sort of in between in terms of deployability issues. Here's a first attempt. We give the court authority a public-private key pair, and the user, when it wants to authenticate, will encrypt its identity under the court's public key. Then in order to revoke, all the court needs to do is decrypt and see whose identity that is. Obviously, this is ridiculous because the user can cheat. It doesn't need to actually send its correct ID, and or can even send someone else's ID. And the way we do that is by having the smart card. I'm just going to go through this very briefly. We have the smart card do that operation, and we model the user actually as a man-in-the-middle adversary. So the user here is trying to somehow force the revocability to fail. So the smart card and the server are going to be working, and the user is actually going to be modeled as a man-in-the-middle adversary. But there's more. I'm going to skip over that. There's more details in the paper. What about passwords? And this is the last extension I want to talk about. What if I don't have a PKI? Okay, so this becomes much more difficult. And if I want to use symmetric keys or passwords or one-time passwords, then, or even biometrics, which is quite wild, right? Doing anonymous authentication using biometrics. It seems to be much more difficult, but here's a following high-level idea. The first step is to use standard authentication. Okay, so I send my password, or I run my fingerprint, or I use my symmetric key. Once I've authenticated, I now register a public key with the user, and then with the server, and then I disconnect. I disconnect, and then at a later stage, I reconnect using that temporary public key and using the same protocols we've seen beforehand. For authentication, there are no problems. That works fine. For anonymity, it's preserved as long as the server can't link the anonymous authentication protocols taking place later with the user who just disconnected beforehand. So you need to either somehow register that key earlier, or you need to use time slots. It gives you a lower degree of anonymity than we had beforehand, a far lower level. And it also intensifies the problem of how do I know the other user's public keys. So we want to be able to register these temporary keys on an external website that's not run by the same server, and would like to assume no collisions. So in conclusion, what I started with is that privacy is far more than just the right to be let alone. the right to be alone, I'm not belittling the importance of it, but the emotional distress is only a very, very small part of the problem. The bigger problem is when our information is actually used against us and not just revealed in terms of what people learned against us. And what we need for that is unlinkability. And anonymous routing can be used to get that on a basic level, but once we need to authenticate, then we lose that as well. So once we have to authenticate, then all the anonymous routing in the world doesn't help us at all. And if authentication is needed, then surprisingly it's possible to achieve anonymity. And we talked about two protocols, one which is very simple and gave verifiable anonymity, one which is more complex cryptographically, that was the ring signatures, but it can actually very, very easily be deployed by just modifying the signature operation in SSL client authentication. We talked a bit about revocable anonymity, and there's definitely much more research to be done on that side, because for now we only have a partial solution. And I think one of the very interesting questions is, can full anonymity be achieved if you're only using symmetric techniques, if you're only using passwords? And we don't have an answer for that question. I think it's definitely an interesting area for future research. That's basically what I said, and thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions.